Big moves, bold ideas, and it's all going down at the Paris Crypto Week. Ripple's powerhouse president Monica Long is dropping major signals you can't ignore. She says banks need connective tissue to plug into blockchain, and Ripple is delivering it. Fiat on-ramps, custody, tokenization, the full stack. She's revealing bold plays, a next-gen stablecoin, real-world asset tokenization, a blockbuster prime broker acquisition, and she's only just getting started. This is the kind of momentum that moves markets. You don't want to miss this. Here's Monica Long.
Ripple was one of the early players in the cryptocurrency scene, and it was set up to be an alternative to Bitcoin, specifically for payments. It began life focusing on cross-border payments, also using the cryptocurrency XRP. Now it's expanding into everything from custody to stablecoins and tokenization. We'll dig in to what those terms mean and why Ripple sees them as the future. I'm very excited because this is amongst one of our first video versions of Beyond the Valley. It's going to be on YouTube, on CNBC.com, and we're here recording it at Paris Blockchain Week. Now, my guest has been in the industry for more than a decade, so she's got a lot of insight. Monica Long, president of Ripple, thank you so much for joining me on Beyond the Valley.
Thank you for having me, Arjun. I'm honored.
So, Monica, I just said there, you've been in the industry for 12 years nearly?
Almost, yeah.
Before you were in PR, what made you make the switch?
Yes. So I started my career at a PR agency. When I was at that agency, Prosper was one of my clients. So if you remember, this was one of the early person-to-person lending marketplaces. The co-founder and CEO was a guy named Chris Larson. He's a serial fintech entrepreneur in the Valley. So before that, he'd founded eLoan. But I loved working with him. I loved the mission of Prosper. It was all about bringing personal loans back to community banking roots. And it just really resonated with me what Chris's vision was. And as a leader, an entrepreneur, I had a good relationship with him, just a good bond. So years later, I went to Intuit, a different tech company, in the interim. And then when he started Ripple, I was catching up with him one day just to learn about what he was doing. And I remember that meeting so well because, I mean, one, he was explaining the concepts of, Bitcoin and blockchain and why he saw this as the most important revolution in finance in more than 50 years. And he was just more lit up than ever. And I kind of caught the bug from him. So I joined Ripple about 12 years ago as our director of communications.
Nice. Well, what have been the biggest changes you've seen over that time in the industry?
Yeah, I wish I'd kept a diary so I could remember all the ups and downs more. But in broad strokes, I can say, I mean, it's been an oddly short, long time. So 12 years is objectively a long time. But then when you think about the scale of transformation that's meant to happen, that's underway with blockchain and crypto, it kind of does make sense that it's taken, many years, decades even to get to the place where we are. So a couple highlights for you. One, I remember in 2014, we started to we knocked on the doors of banks and we explained to them this proposition of, hey, you could do cross-border payments on a blockchain and it would be like near instant, almost free for those FX transactions. But they were like, slammed the door in our face. They were not ready for that conversation. And today, of course, it's a very different world. Banks understand that this is going to be the future of finance. And so they have embraced it a lot more. And then also, obviously that this space has just blossomed so much since then. You kind of mentioned, the original XRP ledger launched as, I think the three guys who made it called it like Bitcoin 2.0. So like in their brains, they were thinking of Bitcoin is this ingenious invention. How can we improve upon scalability and tinker with the consensus model so that you could, enable things like an exchange within the blockchain itself. So that was one of the first alt chains to ever launch. And today, what are there? Thousands, tens of thousands of different chains and projects and layers of the blockchain cake. So it's expanded quite a bit.
It's never a dull day, is it? I've been covering this for about 10 years and it's there's been some wild stories in the industry, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel the reputations got better?
That's a good point. Yeah. So now I'm remembering too, 2014. Yeah. So let's remember Mt. Gox collapsed, went insolvent. that was really bad.
Yeah.
Silk Road bust, bad news. I mean, there was kind of one hit after the other.
Wow.
And yeah, I think that there, you know, as the industry has even grown and whatnot, you still hear from, you know, everyday people or from some of our political leaders and whatnot, a view of crypto that is like, it's all bad news. But I think that those voices are getting fewer and they're getting quieter. Like, I think that the idea that there is opportunity to do good things with the technology is definitely more of the rising tide.
Yeah. So let's talk about Ripple. There may be some of our listeners who don't know too much about Ripple, what you do. So just give us an overview.
Yeah. So we do many things. We are mostly on the commercial side, focused on bringing digital asset infrastructure to financial institutions. So I mentioned, you know, Chris's big vision. Like, what was this thing all about? And he talked about the idea that we have an internet for information. So the ability for us to exchange information and communicate with each other fast and free all around the world. That the real innovation within blockchain is just that, but for money. So being able to represent different assets and forms of money and exchange them near free instantly around the world. So that's kind of like the big idea that we've all been working on all these years. And now I forget what your original question was.
But just I think there's a lot of people who hadn't heard about Ripple, but,
Ripple,
this is what, you know, this is part of what your product's about, right? Using these blockchain technologies to
modernize infrastructure for financial institutions.
Yeah.
So the thing is it's not realistic that the existing systems like banks are going to plug directly into the blockchain. They do need some connective tissue. That's what we provide. So what does infrastructure mean? It's things like getting from, you know, real world currency, fiat currency into digital asset currency. Those are on ramps. The inverse would be off ramps. Secure custody. It's providing, you know, stable coins and even, you know, services for the institutions to be able to tokenize assets. So it's providing that layer of services that they need. In addition, the whole company started because 3 developers created the XRP ledger, which we were talking about.
Yeah.
And so we've always had a belief in, you know, building use cases that would make use of the efficiency within XRP ledger. So the set of services I'm talking about and the use cases that financial institutions would use would be, you know, presumably on this ledger.
Great. And of course, XRP is the digital asset associated with the XRP ledger as well. And that's used in some of your products as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You use that. Let's get into the bigger picture first as well, Monica. So I want to talk to you about the stablecoin you've launched, about the real world asset tokenization. But we have to, I guess, talk about the macro first. And it's been such a fascinating time, I think, for financial markets globally. And this includes the crypto industry as well. There's 2 T's dominating the market, Trump and tariffs. And this has caused volatility globally and in every asset class, including cryptocurrencies as well. What is the view from the industry right now towards what's happening geopolitically and what impact that's having on your world?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the macro environment has become very volatile, like you're explaining, and uncertain. And so I think we at Ripple, we in the industry, we are kind of watching to see what happens, how this plays out. Within crypto, I can say that, within the microcosm of crypto, there's been a lot of market volatility since the beginning. So high times, low times, long low times, the winters, as we call them in crypto. And the technology is here to stay. And so, especially at Ripple, like we really take the long view of build. Like if we build things that solve problems and there's real utility behind it, then, you know, everything else kind of sorts itself out.
Yeah. Are there any risks at the moment that you see that may spark another crypto winter? Or do you think the industry is on a lot more solid footing than it was when we saw the sort of last downturn?
Yeah, it's a good question. Crypto certainly exists within the macro economy. So it's, I don't think it's, it will be a part of the bigger picture. However that pans out, we're going to see. But in terms of like any specific risks to the crypto ecosystem, we're in a sturdier place. Like if I think about the triple S crisis, the crisis from a couple years ago with the bank's Signature and Silvergate Bank kind of debanking crypto, that was a real systemic risk. It was very fragile.
Yeah, it's been interesting to think about we obviously always talk about crypto in cycles, and there were these almost predictable or cycles that had similar patterns over the years around the Bitcoin halving. And those were almost thrown off with the launch of the ETFs in the US. When was that, last year? Yeah, feels a long time. So, with the launch of the ETFs, almost threw off this whole cycles. And it's interesting to think whether those cycles now that we sort of have been used to in the crypto world have changed, whether we see those past cycles again. I don't know.
That's a really good insight. Yeah. And that's a big marker of industry maturation, the ETFs.
The presidency in the US is interesting for multiple reasons, but specifically, I think, to your industry, because it was on a very pro-crypto campaign that President Donald Trump ran on, and he promised a lot of things during that campaign as well. But there is a sense now that we've had some sort of high-profile business leaders come out and be critical of the way the president has acted in the first few months because it may be harming business. Is there a sense of that at the moment in the crypto industry, or are they still pretty supportive?
I think for the crypto industry, what we've seen is a new guard at the SEC that went from rulemaking through enforcement. I don't even know if you could call that rulemaking. It felt kind of like whack-a-mole. So the new SEC administration kind of walking back a lot of those enforcement actions or just dropping them. And then we see things like SOB 121, which was this accounting bulletin. It just made it really hard for banks to hold digital assets. And so with that going away, banks are now really engaging with our industry around digital asset services, which is a good thing. And then we also see Congress, kind of both sides of the aisle, coming together around legislation for stablecoins, which we see as really important because the U.S. market had been very closed off to this whole part of the industry, and it's the biggest economy, biggest capital market in the world. So it's an important player on the field.
Do you think this year you'll see a bit more regulatory clarity for your industry, or at least certain parts of the industry, given this slightly more focus on rulemaking around things like stablecoins and other parts?
Yeah, I do. I think so. I'm optimistic. And I hope that continues to be the case in all parts of the world.
Can I get your take on something that has happened in the first 3 months, which is crypto strategic reserve in the US? Obviously, there was a lot of confusion over it, what assets might be in it, whether they'll be buying new Bitcoin, etc. But ultimately, has this been something positive or kind of slightly underwhelming?
I think it's positive. I think it's a big deal for any government, certainly a G20 government like the US, to just validate the legitimacy of the asset. I think that more than anything is what I took away from it. Yeah.
Have there been any conversations from Ripple around including XRP in that crypto strategic reserve going forward?
I think, Brett, I know what, Trump's announcement was. He did cite XRP as one of the many assets that they would be looking to include. I think, from our standpoint, and our CEO, Brad, has been pretty consistent saying he just wishes for the U.S. government, all governments, to create a level playing field for all crypto assets.
You mentioned the Securities and Exchange Commission earlier in the U.S., and you had a very long-standing legal battle with them. Those issues have gone away now. What does that mean for Ripple?
Yeah, it's good to have that behind us. And the judge's ruling in our case was actually July of 2023. So in that moment, I mean, she wrote the law of the land that XRP in and of itself is not a security. And that's really how we've moved forward with our business since then. The appeal outstanding obviously created some level of uncertainty, but we felt really, really good about her ruling, that it made a lot of sense. And so it's just nice to now have that off the table and done with.
And so what do you think regulation in the US going forward looks like now? Do you think it's going to be a case of new bills like what's happening with stablecoins at the moment, or kind of also using existing laws to try to regulate or at least provide some clarity?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I hope it's a mixture of both, because it doesn't seem like all the rules around financial services need to be completely rewritten. As you know, when we think about the advent of the internet, it's not that, everything had to be, kind of redone to accommodate for the internet. I think it's important that those who are making the rules, in certain agencies, central banks, and legislative branches, that there is, seeking to learn and to listen, to understand the issues from the creators, the entrepreneurs, as well as the consumers, that there's the right balance to definitely protect consumer interests, but then also enable innovation.
Let's talk about stablecoins. I just mentioned it. You launched your own stablecoin, Ripple USD. For our listeners who don't know, stablecoins are basically a type of digital asset linked or pegged to another currency, backed by real-world assets, fiat currency, maybe bonds, cash, other things. For Ripple USD, why did you decide to launch it? Because it feels like the stablecoin market is one that is already so big, and there are so many stablecoins out there. So what are you bringing to the table here?
Yeah, this market's blown up. So I think it's projected to reach, trillions, like $3 trillion plus, I think, over the next couple years even. So it's quickly growing. What we saw was within one of our core use cases. I was talking about that digital asset infrastructure. Core use case we serve is cross-border payments, where going through the correspondent banking system using SWIFT can be slow, multi-days, expensive, 7+% in fees, and very error prone. And like blockchain kind of takes those objections off the table. And especially if you're able to use a stable coin for certain use cases, like, we have work with customers who, have a corridor need between different countries in Latin America where they would much rather deal in dollars than their local currency, which is very volatile, into markets in Asia where it's a similar case. And so, that was kind of the key impetus for us to launch the stablecoin.
Yeah, it's quick, right? You can get effectively the equivalent of $1 in digital version.
And then in a digital version, access to dollars, and then 24/7 availability. So I think the other kind of choke point with the existing system is bank cutoff times, nights and weekends. If you need liquidity, you have to pre-fund your account. You have to kind of guess if you're so imagine you're a corporate, you have to make a payment overseas. You kind of have to guess how much money to park there, as opposed to using this kind of real-time rail.
For stablecoins, typically they've been very much used for trading in and out of different cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
For the consumer space anyway, but that has been a large portion of the use case of them so far.
It's true.
But you are seeing emerging use cases. You've mentioned one there, cross-border payments. Are there other sort of interesting use cases you see for stablecoins going forward, or you're predicting may happen?
Yeah. So one that I think is getting more and more attention is using it as an asset for collateral for trading in the more traditional institutional world. This is one that's definitely spiking for us. We actually just today announced we're acquiring a prime broker called Hidden Road. And this is like a key use case for them.
Interesting. Do you think, or how do you think your stablecoin gets to grow? It's quite young. You said, I think currently as of time of recording, about 300 million market cap. How do you think it grows to kind of compete with some of those bigger stablecoins?
Yeah, so you mentioned a really important point. The stablecoin market has in large part grown with crypto markets overall. So it's like the on-ramp, it's the kind of reserve, the token that people hold if they're actively trading on chain. And so, I think that is a great use case. It's obviously grown a ton, and Ripple US dollars is entering that market through primarily centralized exchanges as the distribution endpoints. Our bet is really on the institutional side. So within payments, within our payment flows in particular, and then, the set of capital markets use cases where, the Hidden Road team's really expert at all of that. And so we're excited to see, what comes from the new marriage.
I mentioned at the start about XRP as well, Monica. What's the relationship here between XRP, Ripple, and your stablecoin? Because some of your cross-border payments products traditionally did use XRP, still use XRP. as a means of exchange in that process. But you also now have the stablecoin. What's the need for XRP if you've got the stablecoin?
Yes. So XRP it serves serves a couple different roles to explain. Within the blockchain, the XRP ledger, it's the native asset. So you need it for gas fees. You need it for the reserve account minimum. And so as there's more users and more use cases built on XRP ledger, that asset will always be needed. Secondly, we were talking about how when the ledger was first invented, it was novel in that it had this decentralized exchange built into it. Within that exchange, which, a lot of the focus from our team is on bringing developers onto the ledger who have use cases for transactions in that exchange. But if a trading pair doesn't have liquidity between it, it auto bridges. It goes between XRP for efficiency, speed, and cost. So that will be increasingly important use case as more activity comes to the blockchain.
Interesting.
But we still do use it, as part of our payments offering. So it's kind of dependent on customer use case.
Another emerging part of your business is real world asset tokenization. The idea you can put, a fraction of a property, for example, digitize that, or multiple different things as well. Why is that such a focus at the moment?
So we've always believed that blockchain would become this like modern financial rail. We started by focusing on the payments use case. I mean, one, massive opportunity, acute pain points like we were talking about, the days of settlement, the high fees, the uncertainty. Payments is also kind of like a base use case for other types of financial services. Like if you think about security settlement, like it triggers a payment at the end of it. So we thought we should tackle this first, but we always did have our sights set on expanding into tackling other types of financial use cases. So capital markets is kind of like a logical place to expand.
So stocks and bonds?
Bonds, exactly.
So how does that kind of work in practice from a technical perspective? Or how would that work kind of in Ripple's case?
Well, so far, we're primarily our custody customers who are banks. So take SG Forge, for example. They are, big part of their business is like capital markets. So they are handling a lot of the tokenization part. It's through our software. We're more of the software providers. So through our software, they're able to kind of issue the token and manage it. But they're really kind of constructing the product around it.
That's interesting. How do you expect do you expect this to hit the consumer as well? Do you think it's sort of, because I've seen examples where it's talking about property was one that I just used, where you can fractionalize property effectively. So if you want to invest in property, rather than having to buy the entire property or the whole house, you could maybe buy a fraction of it because somehow this property has been digitized in a token format, and you can buy, a fraction of it via that. So in that kind of example, that could be a consumer case if there's kind of retail traders who want to invest in property. Or do you see this more in the institutional side?
You just reminded me, Arjun, that I own a fraction of a Banksy from the height of the NFT days.
Oh, wow. I don't want to ask you how much that's worth now.
I support Banksy. I'm proud owner. From our perspective, we got to focus somewhere, right? So our play is certainly more the institutional back end. And it's even the prime broker acquisition, that's more infrastructure. We think that's important. If we can get the infrastructure sewn together between the legacy systems and on-chain, and some of the work we continue to do with XRP Ledger, we're adding new features like lending protocols and, multi-purpose token amendment. I'm getting a little too technical nerdy, but
no, that's good.
You get the point. Our focus is more on how can we create the support infrastructure for these use cases by institutions. And that's not to say I don't believe in the retail use case. I would love to see that. The big part of the story of the crypto revolution is creating access for more people to financial systems, be that payments at a reasonable price or fractional ownership of land.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think when I've heard about tokenization a lot, it's often been those kind of use cases people have spoken about, maybe art, or even cars. I've been spoken about sort of somehow becoming blockchainized in some way.
Tokenizing a car.
Tokenizing a car, various things. But obviously, there's, I think, stocks, bonds, and more financial markets are certainly ones I've heard spoken about as a way to kind of, make more efficient, potentially a bit cheaper, and bring benefits, like to be able to invest in them.
Yeah, cheaper. And when you talk to like the banks, the FIs that run those products, it's kind of shocking. Like a lot of the back end process is still manual, or like it's paperwork. It's just all this stuff that could be automated and just made more efficient with technology.
So what's in the future for Ripple then, Monica? We spoke a bit about what's happening in the US. Now, I know over the past few years, you put so much effort into expanding into Europe and Asia and other parts of the world. And there's always been a bit of hesitation about the future US business because of the way that, it's been seen that the regulators have been quite harsh on the industry. So with sort of the SEC issues out the way, with an administration that is billing itself as a bit more pro-crypto, does this mean a little bit more focus into the US now?
Yeah, it does. We have more business to do in the US today than we did, last year even. Just the fact, banks are much more willing to engage with us on digital asset services like custody, thinking about also partnerships like for reserve banking, for the stablecoin, transaction banking, payment. There's just, the market is much more open today than it was 1 year ago. So definitely more business to do. We're doing more hiring here or in the US. We are still growing and investing in our other markets too, like Europe. Actually really exciting. We just got a license in Dubai for payments from the DFSA, the regulator there. And so that's kind of like a key foothold within the GCC. And then Asia Pac, you mentioned, our Singapore office. I mean, we're expanding that. We're moving into bigger space even this summer. And LATAM as well. So we have a presence in Sao Paulo that has been important.
Yeah, and you mentioned Hidden Road earlier, the acquisition. Yeah. I think you spent 1.25 billion on that.
Yes.
Is that an indication that Ripple is going to be more acquisitive going forward now?
Yes.
Good. So we can expect some more M&A to come.
Yes, more exciting things for sure. This is a big deal. I think 1.25 billion marks it as one of the largest in crypto history. Being a crypto company, we stand alone as being an owner of a non-bank prime broker. The Hidden Road, I'm so bullish on having this tight, under one roof partnership at this point between a company that serves hundreds of the highest volume trading financial institutions with our business, where we can be more of the blockchain tech infrastructure. And for them, they do $3 trillion annually. Revenue is super healthy, 100 million plus. And they can now get more risk capital using our balance sheet, so they can also grow their business exponentially.
And I have to ask you, maybe not in the current market, but I have to ask you about an IPO at some point. Brad has said to me in the past, when the SEC issues are done, we can start thinking about an IPO. Maybe is an IPO in the cards for Ripple at any point soon?
At this moment, we have a lot of liquidity. So we do have billions of dollars cash on the balance sheet. We're in a really healthy position. We're in an acquisitive position, as you put it. So we're really just focused on growing the business as we are now.
Monica, it's been great to catch up. Thanks for coming on Beyond the Valley.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure as always.
Again.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That's it for another episode of Beyond the Valley. Remember